Hi everyone, this is Deckline Leitao, Strength and Conditioning Specialist, and today we are going to talk about 15 hacks that all physiotherapists and all strength and conditioning specialists should know. And I wish I had known these when I started in the field. So with all the work that I've done working with elite athletes, I hope this should be able to help and support new physiotherapists and even strength and conditioning specialists to become better in their field. And to help in this, we have Alap with us, and Alap is a senior physiotherapist who is working with Olympic Gold Quest Foundation for a long time. He has been working with various athletes from archery to boxing to shooting, so a lot of experience there. So we're going to speak about straight to the point 15 hacks that you need to know to be successful in this field. So the first point, most important, most commonly made mistake by every new strength and conditioning specialist or physiotherapist who gets into sport is thinking that, hey, I'm qualified, so that's it, that's all I need to know. Understand that when you finish your class, when you finish your degree, there's probably 50 others with you who've done the same course. So there's nothing special about you. You're just one of those 50. And when we look at in a state, there's probably another 500. If you look at in a country, it's probably 5,000. So what makes you special? Over time, what is it that you have which others don't? And that's only going to be results. Results is the key. Can you deliver? That's the key.
I completely agree with this. Getting qualified is just half the job done. And eventually when you're on the field, you need to produce results. What matters is, blending all that you've learned together in one process that you can trust, which delivers at the end of the day. So it's not about doing A, B, C. There's no right answer to anything. You just have to deliver. Eventually, what works is what works, and you have to be able to do that. That's it. Yeah.
Absolutely. You can either deliver or you can't. That's all there is. Sport is very cruel, and that is what it is. You can either deliver. If you don't deliver, you're not good. So you have to deliver in the situation that you're in, and not about just saying I'm qualified, so that makes it special.
Yeah.
Okay, the second point, very important, is to understand that there's limitations to sports science. Okay, and what are limitations? Well, limitations are the fact that you can't say that if you do work with an athlete and you do sports physiotherapy or you do strength and conditioning, or for that matter even nutrition, that you do these things and then the athlete becomes a champion. Wish it was that simple. It doesn't work like that. There are a lot of factors, right from genetics to training history, injuries, past experiences, technical skill being one of the most important, But again, even that sometimes is not sufficient. So there's a lot of factors for sports success. Sometimes it's just destiny. Some people just reach there at the right time. So sports science is effective, but it has limitations. It's not everything. There are people who do it without sports science. There are people who do it with it. And there are people who use a bit of it. We need to understand that when we come in, how much of that treatment do we need to give or that training, and not to think that without us, people wouldn't survive. So we have to understand our role and the role of our expertise in this.
Yeah, I completely agree, Declan, with you. I think eventually what we have to understand is that as maybe whether it's a physio or a trainer, you are just supplementing the athlete. The athlete is eventually doing his job. Skills are the most important thing, I think, again. But then eventually you just don't know what works and what doesn't work. And science is just, trying to understand what works. But eventually we are never going to get there, probably. We're just going to be supportive. And we have to always understand that some things will never work, some things will work. And you have to keep, trialing, and it's all a game of trial and error. And with experience, you get better at it. It's just very simple, but even at the end of the day, you will agree that we may do 100 things right, and then we may do one thing that is that may not be right, even if we take all the precautions in the world. And it's just the way sport goes, and therefore I think luck is the most important thing at the end of the day.
That is why there is no 100% surety in any sports science technique. We attempt to help the athlete. There's no perfect 100% step. So, and this is the limitation which we all need to understand. Don't get in there, especially with young physiotherapists or sometimes even experienced ones and strength and conditioning coaches thinking that, hey, I've come and I'm here to change the world, and all that was missing was me. You're not that important. You are important, but you're not that important. Remember this. The third point is about knowing your role. What are you doing in the whole system? Are you a physiotherapist or are you a psychologist? Are you a strength and conditioning coach? Are you a technical coach? Are you a nutritionist? Know your role. Firstly, be good at it. Know exactly what is the specialization that you offer. Be good at it. There's no choice about that. You have to be good at your job. It's not even a choice. And do realize that there are good trainers and good physios, and sometimes not so good trainers and not so good physios. Just because you're qualified doesn't mean you're great. And this is the reality of life, and that's the reason why there's always some doctors we go to, or some accountants we go to, or some lawyers we go to. Why? Because those are the ones who get the job done. So need to understand this. So understand your role in the system, what you do, stick to it. And one of the best probably advice that I've ever got from one of my mentors was, stick to your role no matter how tempted you are to poke your nose in the other specialties.
I think I'll just reframe the know your role and stick to it. It's like you have to understand your boundaries at all times as a professional. I mean, it's about knowing your role, because when you're on the field with an athlete, say as a physio, you may be there 24/7 with the athlete, and then you're still a physio. I mean, no matter what happens, you're still their physio. You can never associate them in a very personal manner. Even knowing your role, as Deckline said, is also about sticking to these boundaries. You understand these boundaries as a professional, and you do your job like we discussed in earlier points. You're there to be the physio for the athlete. Do what you have to do, and then just step aside and let the athlete have that personal space that he or she will have. Again, one of the common mistakes that physios generally do, they try to step into the strength and conditioning role a lot in terms of planning and in terms of executing sessions. I feel when you have a strength and conditioning expert in the team for the athlete, it's best that each person does their job individually in isolation, and then eventually collectively a team effort makes the job better for the athlete. And that's going to be always the best effective way to do it, because you have learned physiotherapy to do physiotherapy. You've not trained to be a trainer, unless obviously if you've done something like an add-on CSCS or something like that. That's a completely different story. But then you have to always remind yourself to stick to your role. Yeah,
completely agree. In fact, even with trainers, I would say for trainers to understand that they might have an opinion when somebody gets a hamstring tear, or somebody has a spasm, but then that's not your expertise. That's not my expertise to talk about injuries. I have not trained for that. I'm not experienced for that, and I haven't proven myself in that. I think that becomes the most important. So even with physios who get into strength and conditioning or vice versa, people need to understand that you need to prove as well over time. It's just not about shifting. What's there on your record to show, and how many times have you done it, and stick to what you're good at. It's always easier for the strength and conditioning guy to stick with that rather than getting into the realm of injuries or talking about sports supplementation. That becomes a very common thing. Trainers tend to jump into that side. So one needs to know what to advise on. Are you talking about exercise science and training, or rehabilitation, or nutrition? So yeah, know your role, stick to your expertise, and which you should anyways, because that's what you get paid for. Okay, you get paid for an X amount of job. Stick to that. Don't do more than that. Don't do what you don't know. You'll spoil your name, and you'll end up, even losing credibility in what you have. The fourth point is a very crucial one again. Okay, now strength and conditioning, physiotherapy. A lot of times, many of us go overseas and study. I've studied in South Africa, the UK. Alap has gone to Australia, studied. So we all come back. We think, hey, I've been to first world, and I've come back with my education. So here I am, the person everybody was waiting for. Understand that, principles that you've studied, and this is something only experience will teach you. What you learn in the Western world, okay, it's amazing. It's good, and it's good in that system. When you bring it here, you have to adapt it to the Indian system. And when I say the system, I mean the Indian bodies, the Indian culture, the Indian food habits. You can't just copy paste what the 17-year-old Caucasian origin, maybe English guy is doing to what happens in India. Just doesn't work. And this is where a lot of even Western coaches keep failing again and again, because they just think that that's the system that is done and that's how athletes are trained. It's not athletes, it is an Indian athlete, or it's a South Asian athlete from maybe Sri Lanka or from Bangladesh or from Pakistan, from various these regions. Within India itself, if you look at somebody who's from the Northeast, would be completely different to somebody from Punjab. The guy from Punjab would be completely different to somebody from Gujarat. Food habits would be different, from eating non-vegetarian to some of them being vegetarian. So there's various different reasons why it should not be applied. So yes, the science is very important. Yes, what you've studied overseas, bring it, but understand that it has to adapt to this system. It's just like, your driving has to adapt to the Indian system. When you come, no matter which car you've driven in England or which car you've driven in America or New Zealand or any other country, it has to adapt here. And I think any program only works when it's specific to that region. There's no one size fits all. So yeah, don't simply copy paste, sports science concepts to South Asian needs. I think any nation, because it doesn't work. It hasn't worked. Or else we would have had all this time had probably an equal number of medals to all the other Western countries. So we've been trying that again and again, and I strongly believe there's a mix that has to be there. We can't just copy it. We have to adapt it and then make the best out of that, so that we get the best out of what we need. Alap, what you'd like to add?
I think the most important point is to, when you learn, if say it's great that you get to learn. If you get to learn from these countries, first world countries, I think it's really good, because then gives you an opportunity to see what others are doing. But then you have to sort of take it in and then eventually process it in a way that you can translate it to your world. And you are the best person to do it, because you understand your world better. So it's, in fact, rather than copy pasting it, where you're sort of not going to use what's working on the ground here. In fact, if you absorb something from the West and then translate it to your culture, where you've sort of been born and brought up, it's very easy for us to, in fact, do that if we keep our eyes and ears open to do that. So it's just about being open to taking all it in and then being able to translate it to our system. And only then that when you have a certain amount of adaptability is when you will be able to survive in all kinds of setups, whether you work here in India in different kind of setups, be it shooting, which is a very, archery, shooting, boxing, all are different kinds of sports. Even when you talk about the background that the athletes come from. And when you say that, you have to realize where to apply what kind of treatment model, or where to apply what kind of approach to just get your job done. Eventually, remember the fact that we discussed in the first few points was, if you are able to get the job done, that's all that matters. There's nothing in the world that will stop you from working if you are able to get the job done. So don't simply copy paste Western sports science concepts. Create your own method to use those points, and eventually, a perfect blend needs to happen of the science and the culture that you're working in.
Absolutely. Never to forget, who's the person for whom your expertise is going to be used. It's not about you, it's about the person, it's about the student, it's about the athlete. Where do they come from? I think that's something never to forget. So yeah, absolutely. Don't just copy paste those principles, because it has not worked so far. Let's be very honest, it's not worked all these years. And if we keep doing it, we keep getting the same results. So be clever. If you want to be a clever SNC coach, if you want to be a clever physiotherapist, understand there's difference between the two. We are different. We are all humans, but we are different. We can't just say, that, hey, we're all the same, 2 legs, 2 arms. We are different. We grow up in different systems. So never to forget about this. The 5th point, guys, is don't overtrain if you're a strength and conditioning specialist. And Alap will later talk about overtreating as a physiotherapist. But as a strength and conditioning coach, understand that athletes who train with you, They do something else, which is practice their sports skills for another 3 hours, sometimes another 2 hours in the evenings. So their bodies are already taxed. So strength and conditioning has to help. It has to help them perform better in that aspect. So don't make it so tiring that it is completely hardcore in the gym, that when they're gone for practice, it's not helping them. So the typical bodybuilding approach which is there, or maybe a CrossFit approach of just come on, two more reps, never give up, and that one more rep, that is not the technique that you should be applying, because we are not in a powerlifting competition. So we are not also training for aesthetics where we're getting some guys ready for posing. We're getting guys ready for performance. So whatever training you do, don't overtrain. Don't use the hardcore gym, the gym sort of brotherhood type of training approach. Stick to what you're good at and stick with what works for the person, which is about training right. So train right. Don't train wrong or train extra. I sometimes say this, that exercise is like medicine. If you use right, it can cure you. If you use wrong, it can kill you. Okay, yeah. So don't overtrain. Probably one of the most common things that I keep saying across Indian athletes, overtrained bodies, just train unnecessarily hard. Nutrition doesn't match, climate doesn't match, economic standard doesn't match, but just train hard. People just believe somehow train hard. They equate it probably to praying hard, that somehow it will all fall into place. Pray hard. It doesn't work like that with the human body. Okay, it's something which requires rest. So don't break it to the point of no return. Alap, you'd like to speak about treatment. What happens in physiotherapy? What's the common mistake?
Yeah. So just to take your overtraining discussion ahead, we have one very common saying. We don't want to be in a place where sweat is directly proportional to performance. That's just not how it works. And when it comes, again, when you say about, when you talk about over treating, very similar context, but in terms of physiotherapy, you don't want to be in a place where you treat an athlete and the athlete is not able to train for three or four sessions, or even a single session. You don't want that happening. So eventually, your goal as a physiotherapist should be to get maximum training possible for the athlete at maximum efficiency. Be it the athlete's fitness sessions, be it the athlete's skill sessions. Your job is to supplement the system in a way that the athlete will be able to function at his peak during those sessions. And at any point of time, if you are doing something that makes the athlete take that step back because you've done something, I think that's just that's an absolute no-no. So and every enthusiastic physiotherapist would want to make a difference, and would want to treat, would like to intervene. But then there are times when sometimes just absorbing everything around you and only treating or attending specific things that you need to attend to are important, and therefore at times doing less is more. And when you have to absolutely intervene, I think that's the time you have to get in there and do the right job and just move away and let the athlete do the rest. I think that's and you get better at it with experience. There's nothing right or wrong about it. You will learn through mistakes, but always remember this, that you have to always keep an eye on the fact that whether you are over treating someone, whether it's really required. If you are administering a technique, whether it's really required at this point, should I really be doing it or not? Another thing I want to attend to here is, if you remember the phase of athletes training, if it's an in-season sort of a situation, or whether you're in a competition. So what you can do in, say, the normal training environment versus what you can do at a competition venue is a completely different ball game. At competitions, you don't want to try anything new. You may want to just be there with the athlete, just focus on very tiny things that you have already done and have worked for you. Even if they are completely wrong in textbooks, sometimes they work with the athlete, and you want to exercise only them during those crunch moments of a tournament. And whereas you can do a few things, experiment on a few things when the athlete is, say, doing his normal routine training. So that's why, again, coming back to the point, don't overtreat. At times, doing less is more.
I'd say the same in training as well. If there are days when you need to take an off, rather take an off than do an extra session. Nothing goes wrong. Nobody's going to. There's always the next day to train. So yeah, rather train less than train more. Sometimes in strength and conditioning, mainly because most of the times overtraining will lead to injuries. That's the last thing you want. Somebody is injured, you fail. In training, if they've got injured, especially in the gym, you fail as a strength and conditioning coach. Yeah, so don't overtrain and don't overtreat if you're a physiotherapist. Obviously, at times doing less is more stands true all the time. Thank you.